Hello, Shiver Seekers. Are you ready to follow us into the unknown? I'm Cynthia.
And I'm Stephanie. You have found the dark oak.
Today we're going to be discussing the very mysterious death of Jessica Renee Johnson.
Welcome to the Dark Oak, the mystery podcast with purpose. Each month through our charity called the Branch of Hope Foundation, we give a portion of earnings from our Patreon and sponsors to a nonprofit organization related to the first episode of the month. To find out how you can be part of the movement, head over to thedarkoak.com or stay with us until the end of the episode and we will give you all the details.
Hey, thank you, Steph. And before we get into today's episode, I just want to say what an amazing job you did on the 3-parter Maura Murray. I mean, what a twisty, turny journey you took us on and really personalized that case for me. So,
you know what's funny? When I first started working on it, I was like, oh, I could put this in an hour. I could put this in one episode. That clearly did not
what
work
was
out.
it? Over the 3 parts, it was probably closer to 4.
We could have definitely made it a 4-parter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I started trying to do 1, and then I told you it's probably going to be 2, and then it wound up being 3.
Right.
Our first 3-parter, which I'm pretty proud of it, though.
It was so good. Stephanie does most of the editing, but I always give it a listen after. But this is one I've listened to a couple times because you just did such an amazing job. I still have really no clue what happened to Maura. If you have not listened to that episode, those episodes, you need to check them out.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys are kind of sick of hearing my narrator voice, so I'm really excited to hear Cynthia's case today.
Hopefully I remember how to do it.
Oh, please.
Well, today, as I told you in our teaser, we're going to be talking about the very heartbreaking story. It's the story of 37-year-old mother, daughter, sister who really left a hole in the hearts of all who loved her. As I mentioned, it's the story of the mysterious death of Jessica Renee Johnson. And this case has been covered on several of the more well-known podcasts. So you may have heard a little bit about this case, but I wanted to make sure that the information that we brought was accurate and up to date. So I reached out to Linda Johnson, Jessica's mother.
Yeah.
Now, Linda has been very vocal in her daughter's case because, as you can imagine, she has many questions that she would like answers to. Linda and I spoke for quite a while, and we've continued a texting conversation as well. So I'm really grateful to her that she took the time to speak with me, honestly, about something as intimate and painful as the loss of her daughter.
Sure.
Now, I also want to let our listeners know that I reached out to another person in the story, and it is someone who was with Jessica in the 24 hours before she died. And I'm not going to name them because I'm not 100% sure that they were able to see my message. So I don't want to call them out because I don't know. They may have spoken to me, but I'm telling you this to let our listeners know that we really try to bring the most accurate information here. And, we're bringing the story from as many people as we can who are actually there.
Well, and again, as we know, the more stories get covered, I mean, Maura Murray being another example, the more these stories get covered, the more the information gets skewed. It's like the proverbial telephone game.
Sure.
It's nice that you were able to circle back and try to get this information from Linda on a case like Jessica's that really develops legs over time.
Right. Absolutely.
And a lot of different theories, a lot of different speculation, and a lot of those can be really damaging to the actual investigation.
Oh, absolutely. And we've seen that over and over again where something that's so wildly reported and just becomes, people just assume it's true and it's not. So, yeah, it was really important to me to actually talk to Linda and say, please tell me in your words what happened.
Sure.
Well, let's go ahead and go back to 2017 when Jessica Renee Johnson was a beautiful 37-year-old mother who lived in Horn Lake, Mississippi, which is about 10 miles outside of Memphis. It's a tri-state area near the border of Mississippi, Tennessee, and Arkansas. And Jessica was an energetic, outgoing, and really fun person. She was super fun to be around. She came from a beautiful, loving family with a mom and dad who really adored her and her sister named Kayla. Jessica was gorgeous. That is one of the things that you will read about her. Anytime you do any kind of research on her, you will read about how physically beautiful she was. And she was. She was exceptionally beautiful. And she took great pride in how she looked. And Jessica was always dressed up. She wore makeup. She made sure her hair looked nice. Looking good was definitely something that was important to her. Now, Jessica was a single mother to 2 children. She had an adult son named McLean and a daughter named Eden, who was 8. And Jessica was a super good mom. She loved her kids. I mean, they meant everything to her. At the time of her death, Jessica and Eden lived with Jessica's parents, Linda and David Johnson. And McLean, as I said, was a young adult, so he lived on his own. Now, one of the things that had been commonly misreported in this case is that Jessica was a party girl. Linda has said several times on different platforms, and she told me directly that that is not accurate. Now, Linda didn't try to sugarcoat anything. She did acknowledge that Jessica was struggling, but she said that it was really only the last 5 years of her life that things started getting really difficult for Jessica. And Linda believes that there are a few factors that may have culminated to create these issues. So, first of all, Jessica was involved in a pretty bad car accident, and she was prescribed painkillers, which we know can be very addictive.
Yeah.
And I personally have seen people take these types of medications, get addicted, and then getting off of them can be very, very difficult, even for somebody who's never struggled with addiction or drug use.
And it just affects every part of your life. And I'm so grateful you're going over this because it's kind of the crux of this case, really. In my opinion, it's a big part of it.
Yes. Jessica was absolutely struggling at the time of her death. Jessica also had a prescription for Xanax,
Okay.
which she had had since her mid-20s. And that she had, been prescribed because she, like many of us, struggled with anxiety.
Yeah.
According to Linda, the tri-state area where the Johnson family lived had a really big drug problem. It still does. So when Jessica found herself struggling, sadly, there were plenty of people just waiting there, ready to be a negative influence in that regard.
Isn't that terrible? Just predators.
Yes, really, really
Okay,
terrible.
so we know painkillers because of her car accident, Xanax for anxiety, which again, that's pretty common.
Right.
But there were also these predatory folks that were kind of taking advantage of that too.
Right. High drug usage rate in this area.
Got it.
But again, Linda wants to make sure that we emphasize that Jessica was really more of a social drug user, and she did have long stretches of time where she was not using at all, other than, her prescribed Xanax and things like that.
Got it.
Now, something else happened during that last 5 years of Jessica's life that brought her down, because that's when she got into a couple of pretty rough romantic relationships.
Oh,
so about 5
these
years.
are tough.
Yeah. About 5 years prior to her death, she started dating a man who was in and out of jail, and just, there was some domestic abuse allegations. It was just not a situation you want to find your daughter in.
Right.
But then after that, she started seeing a man named Garland Hart. Garland was Jessica's on-again, off-again boyfriend. And I say that, in quotes, because it was very much like not steady.
Okay, got it.
Again, he was not the type of man you would want your daughter to date. He had a very checkered past. He struggled with drug abuse, domestic violence. He was really rough around the edges. And with the exception of the last few years of her life, Garland was not the type of person Jessica would have normally dated. And Linda thinks that Jessica was probably trying to help him. She had that helper personality, and she was a really kind person. And so Linda thinks that was probably a lot of what kept her dating Garland. She was probably trying to save him.
There's probably a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, probably. Now, they'd been dating on and off again for about 2 years. And Jessica's friends and family say that Garland was both mentally and physically abusive.
Oh, man. Poor Jessica.
Now, Garland does deny ever being abusive with Jessica, but he has had several other domestic abuse charges against him with other women. So I am not buying that he did not abuse Jessica.
His track record is not supporting what he's saying.
Right. We know he's capable of doing it.
Okay.
Now, Linda told me that there were several times while they were dating that Jessica would be spending time with Garland, and then things would go bad, things would go sour, and Jessica would call at all times of the day or night asking Linda to come pick her up, and she always would. Jessica once told Linda that if anything ever happened to her, she needed to go find Garland.
Ooh, poor Linda.
To hear
here's
your
your
daughter
adult daughter who is making her own choices, but is not necessarily choosing wisely. Such a tough spot.
Oh, as a mother, that's hard to see happening. And you're helpless. Really, you're
Yeah.
helpless.
Yeah. It sounds like Linda was doing everything that she could. And honestly, it sounds like Jessica was probably doing the best she could in that moment, with what she was able to do.
Right, right. I totally agree. Like you love somebody and you want to help them and you think you can. And I get it. I totally get it. Well, again, adding to Garland's kind of, not so great lifestyle, he seemed to like hop around a lot and just
Like moving.
yes.
Okay.
He would just party at different houses.
So
for
he's
days at
like a
time.
couch surfer.
Yeah, I think officially he did live with his best friend, but yeah, he would be gone for weeks at a time on somebody else's couch.
Okay.
So the week that Jessica died, he'd been using heroin at his sister's house, which was over an hour away.
Okay.
And Linda believes that's what made Jessica want to go stay with him on the night that she did die.
To help take care of him.
To go save him.
Oh, gosh.
So it was Wednesday, May 31st, 2017, and Jessica and Garland went to Garland's best friend Jesse's house. And this is where I think he kind of considered himself to be living at the time.
Okay.
This house was a major party house. A lot of people came and went. Drugs were dealt out of this house. It was not a good place to be. So the next day, Thursday, June 1st, Garland and Jessica had an argument. From what I could gather, Jessica's friend Katie had given Garland $300 to fix her SUV, and Garland was supposed to do this while Katie was at work, leaving Jessica and Garland with possession of the vehicle.
Okay.
So the plan was that Garland would fix the SUV during the day, and then Jessica would use the vehicle to pick Katie up from work.
Okay.
However, that evening, Jessica was 15 minutes late to pick Katie up. So Katie was, one, upset that Jessica was late to pick her up in her own car, but two, very upset to find out that Garland did not fix the car.
Oh, first of all, I was like, 15 minutes late is kind of my MO. So Katie and I would not be square, but yes, not fixing the car, that's definitely not cool.
Yeah, but if you were 15 minutes late to pick me up in my own car.
Sorry, girl, I love you and I would try my best, but I make no guarantees.
And you know what? I know that about you. And would have actually probably...
You would either told me 15 minutes earlier. I always kind of give myself a 15-minute window. You don't want to be early. That's awkward.
No, depending. Well, I don't know. My anxiety makes me get somewhere super early so I can scope it out.
See, my anxiety makes me show up late because I don't want to be there and be awkward.
Okay.
If I just slide in right after, then I could just kind of make an entrance when everything's already going.
Okay. I get it. Same anxiety. Presents different ways.
But yeah, you would have either told me 15 minutes early or you would have just assumed I was going to be 15 minutes late.
Absolutely. That is absolutely 100% true.
Yeah,
one of those two would have happened. Yes.
You know me.
I get it.
And I probably should have planned to be on time because I know your anxiety was going to make you flip out on the other side, wondering where I was.
Exactly.
So I probably should have read the room a little better.
A little bit.
Sorry about my theoretical late pickup.
I forgive you. I expected it, theoretically.
Theoretically. Moving on.
Okay. So Katie was mad, probably more about the fact that she gave Garland this money to fix her car and it didn't happen.
Totally valid.
Right. Now, while Jessica was picking Katie up.
Also, why are you going to give this man's $300 before he actually fix your car? What made you think that he was going to fix your car? This man's.
I don't know that I would have trusted Garland to fix the vehicle.
And gave him money up front. No,
yeah,
man.
I don't know that I would have. But, maybe Katie knew something about Garland that, I don't know, maybe he was really good at working on, automobiles.
Well, he was also very good at using heroin. One normally trumps the other, I would imagine.
I wonder if the heroin use affected the vehicle repair job.
You know, it's possible. Not knowing how to repair cars or use heroin, I can't say for certain, but I imagine they don't go together.
There could be a correlation.
Yeah, there could be a conflict.
Yes. So while Jessica was picking Katie up, Jessica got a text from Jessie. Remember, Jessie is the roommate.
Okay, Garland's roommate. Yeah, got it.
Jessie saying that Garland was in his bedroom with 2 other women, inferring that Garland was, hooking up with these women, cheating on Jessica.
Oh, Garland. Oh, Jessica. Oh, this is not the best situation.
It's sad. It's really sad.
All of it's very sad.
Jessica was obviously very upset by this, and when she and Katie got back to Jessie's house, Katie was ready to help Jessica pack up and get out of there.
Yeah, sure.
But
it's about darn time.
Right. But that's not what happened. And I have been here. Oh, man, I have been here. Jessica didn't want to leave things the way they were.
Now, was it true? Were the women there?
We don't know.
Okay.
I don't put anything past Garland. This is a party house. There were always people there.
Okay. But by the time Jessica got there, they weren't there, but it doesn't mean they weren't there originally.
They may have been there. There's like a group of just unnamed people constantly coming going. I mean,
yikes. Okay. So who really knows?
Who really knows?
But at this point, Jessica is upset.
She's upset because she believes.
And her friend Katie is upset.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Because even if the women weren't there, she's being told that, it just, it's not good.
No, it's not good.
Right. So, Katie wants her to get out of there, but Jessica loves this guy. So she doesn't want to leave things the way they are. So she decided to stay and try to work things out with Garland. But not surprisingly, Garland had no interest in having a healthy, productive conversation about any of this. So he told Jessica to leave. And according to the witnesses at the house, Jessica left around 6 p.m. in hysterics. Now, Jesse, the homeowner, says that he got a text from Jessica after she had left his house saying that she did not want to feel the pain anymore, which, given what we know happens next, sounds pretty ominous, and it has been used as evidence, if you want to call it that Jessica may have taken her own life. However, Jessica's friend Summer, who has seen this text, says that to her it sounded more like something someone would say out of frustration.
Like a breakup text.
Right. Not necessarily a suicidal thought, as it has later been kind of painted to have been.
Sure, I could certainly see that going either way.
Right. Now, Jesse also said that one of his other nameless roommates, saw Jessica out in the driveway that night. And this person alleges that they saw Jessica pull the shoestrings out of her shoes and threaten to kill herself with them. Now, this person must not have been too concerned because they just shrugged this off and told Jessica they didn't want to hear it and closed the door on her. And this was allegedly the last time anyone saw Jessica until 16 hours later.
Who are these people?
Not the people that you want to be around. That's just the truth.
Oh, gosh.
Because, I imagine...
It's just shady character after shady character.
Right. And I imagine this poor woman in such distress, so sad. It doesn't matter that the guy, she's dating isn't good enough for her and she should leave him. She's upset. She's sad. And nobody seems to really care or be kind to her. And that's hard for me to think about. The next morning, Friday morning, between 9:30 and 10 a.m., a postal worker was making her rounds when she found Jessica kneeling on both of her knees with her legs tucked underneath her, like you might imagine you might sit to pray.
Okay.
Jessica was leaning up against the post of the mailbox, and the grass around her was several feet high. Jessica had 2 shoelaces that had been tied together around her neck, creating a type of noose, and then this noose was attached to the 38-inch tall mailbox post. Jessica was dead.
It's just such a terrible scene. The entire thing is such a terrible, terrible scene.
Terrible scene. for everybody.
For
Just
for everyone.
to wake up and come out of the house and see this, for the postal worker to see this. I mean, terrible. Now, Jessica's purse was open on the ground between her legs with her cell phone inside. And Jessica's family would later learn that the password to her cell phone was changed in the hours just before or after she died. Now, I'm going to stop right here because every podcast, anything I've seen on this case, for years it was reported that no one was able to get into her phone to see if any outgoing messages had been sent, to see if any incoming message. Nobody had been able to get into her phone because this passcode had been changed. And Apple, despite the phone being, I believe it was in her father's name, would not send the records. Nobody could get in the phone. So that was a big question. What's in this phone? Maybe it tells us what we need to know.
Right.
Linda told me that several years later, they were finally able to get into the phone. There was nothing of note. So
Okay. Nothing mysterious
nothing
on there.
mysterious on the phone.
I understand how that could have been a big question mark for the few years that they couldn't get into the phone.
It was huge. If you listen to anything on this case that was done before that phone was cracked into, it was huge because, I mean, it would be. How do we know?
Of
The
course.
fact that the passcode was changed.
It could hold all the clues.
It could. And then the fact that the passcode was changed and, nobody knew how that happened and nobody knew how to get into it.
So at this point, I mean, I assume anybody that's thinking she possibly took her own life is thinking she changed the passcode, but there was nothing else nefarious on the phone.
There was nothing else nefarious on the phone, and truly, I don't know what the thoughts are on why the passcode changed. I guess if you thought she took her own life, you would assume that maybe she did it. But if you don't believe she took her own life, and a lot of people don't, then there are questions as to why the passcode would have been changed. But there were more questions when we were unsure what was on the phone.
Absolutely. But now knowing there was nothing on the phone of note, it makes the changing of the password much less suspicious, because the idea would be if someone had changed the passcode on the phone, it would have been to cover something up.
Right.
But if there's nothing to cover up, it
Right.
makes it not look as ominous.
True. It's just one of those weird things.
It's a weird
It's
thing.
just a weird thing that kind of like you said.
Because honestly, I've had the same passcode. I probably shouldn't say this on, on our worldwide podcast, but I mean, I haven't changed the passcode on my phone for a long time. I don't know. Is that something you do regularly?
I only change it if my kids learn it and then they want to get into my phone all the time
Okay.
and play games or whatever. And for whatever reason, I'm afraid they're going to delete. I'm not a techie person. I don't back stuff up, as we are aware.
Yes, I am aware.
So if I had, something on there that I was being protective of, I might change the passcode then so my kids can't get into it.
Okay.
But otherwise, no. Jessica's shoes were found without their shoelaces, either in the house or close to the house. Both have been reported.
Okay.
So I'm not sure which one is accurate.
Okay. But not next to her.
Not next to her. So what that means is either way, no matter where the shoes were, Jessica would have had to walk to the mailbox barefoot through tall grass, presumably in the dark.
Okay, gotcha. Or if they were outside the house, possibly thrown them.
I guess.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of grasping at straws here.
Sure.
But again, depending on how they were found. But that would be unusual too.
That would be
All
strange.
this is a bit unusual.
Right. And when this postal worker found Jessica, she immediately freaked out and called for help. And that's when another postal worker arrived, which is a little confusing to me. So I don't know who actually called the police. If I can see myself in this situation calling the police, but then also calling my mom or a friend or something.
Sure.
So I can kind of see how this happened. So the second postal worker arrived and they took what is now a pretty infamous photo of Jessica that has been circulated online. So if you Google image a picture of Jessica, this photo will pop up. It has been edited to cover her face and such, but this is the photo taken by the postal worker.
Which is also weird. I can't imagine being taking a picture of that.
A lot of people think it's very strange, but honestly, in this case, it might actually be a blessing in disguise because...
I mean, in hindsight, yeah, but in that moment when you're I don't know, would you take a picture of that as just a civilian? Wouldn't you think the police are going to take a picture of that?
I don't think I would come across a deceased person and think to take a picture. I don't think I would.
Even if it was bizarre circumstances, I wouldn't take a picture.
I don't think I would. It would feel insensitive to me, I think, to do that.
Yes. And for what purpose? It's not someone you know.
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying this postal worker did anything incorrect.
Right.
I'm
It's just a weird reaction.
It's a weird reaction.
And that's talked about a lot, that just like, what a weird response. But again, in this case, it's actually really good because that photo is how we know the situation in which she was found, because the police certainly haven't shared anything with us.
Right.
Now, let me describe this photo just a little bit. Jessica's sitting there kneeling exactly as I described. Her left side, if you're standing in front of the mailbox, like you're directly in front of the mailbox, she is behind the mailbox post, with her left side leaning up against the mailbox post.
Okay.
So just so you can visualize, that's where she is. Now, right away, Jessica's friends and family thought things were off with this whole scenario. So first of all, Jessica was found wearing a baggy gray camouflage t-shirt and then a pair of jeans. And none of Jessica's friends or family recognized this clothing. In fact, they outright said it was not hers and it was not anything she would have worn. Now, I will say, when I talked to Linda, I asked and said, okay, but she's hanging out with her boyfriend. We're going into the weekend. Is it possible that, because she was just hanging out, that maybe she was a little more casual? And she said, yes, it's possible. But still, it is interesting that the clothes, nobody had ever seen them before. And it was more so the fact, not that she wouldn't have been hanging out casually, but it was more so the fact that she was found looking like that. Because, and I'll tell you a little bit more in a minute, but it didn't seem to ring true that Jessica, if she had killed herself, would have wanted to have been seen that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair.
It was very difficult for Jessica's family and friends to imagine that Jessica would have committed suicide in such a way that left her so displayed. So remember, in life, she took great pride in her appearance, but when she was found, she wasn't wearing any makeup, her hair wasn't done. She was dressed very casually in these clothes no one recognized. So it just didn't add up.
I think this is difficult to say because I think all of that was very true when she was in her right mind. I'm very interested to hear what the toxicology report came back as, because if she's under the influence, did that affect the way that she appeared?
That's a good point. That's a very valid question. Absolutely. Well, before I talk about her toxicology report, let me tell you.
I love how you're keeping me in suspense about this.
I am. Well, I want to set the scene for, how she was found. The other thing that her parents and her family and her friends thought just was super bizarre was the fact that she was kneeling in tall grass. And remember how I said it was believed that she would have had to walk through this grass barefoot. Jessica was known for being like super terrified of bugs.
Okay.
She was not an outside girl.
Okay.
Literally, for her to kneel down in grass or for her to walk barefoot through this tall grass just seemed completely out of the realm of possibility. It kind of reminds me of the Phoebe Handsjuke case, where she went down this garbage chute in a very claustrophobic, like a very tight scenario.
That's
and I
exactly
remember
right.
us talking and me being like, I'm claustrophobic. You would never find me in a garbage chute. You just wouldn't. I'm claustrophobic.
Right. So if you have this particular fear, you're going to put yourself through that.
Right, right. When there are other options, quite frankly. The way in which Jessica died also seemed very bizarre. So one of the things that makes Linda so credible to me is that she is not closed-minded about what may have happened with her daughter. She outright said that Jessica's drug of choice was Xanax. So if Jessica had been found having overdosed on Xanax, that would have been a more believable possibility. She also believes that if Jessica had killed herself, she would have literally looked like Sleeping Beauty. She said she would have been zhuzhed up. She would have been beautiful. She would have
planned and prepared.
Yes. She would have wanted to have been found looking a certain way. And then something that really interesting that happened just shortly before Jessica's death. Did you ever watch the show 13 Reasons? I think it's called 13 Reasons or 13 Reasons Why. Yeah. So it's centered around this suicide.
Right.
Very, very shortly before Jessica's death, Jessica was hanging out with some girlfriends. and they were watching this show, and it got to this scene with this suicide, and the
Yeah.
girls had this conversation about, wow, if I were to ever kill myself, I would never do that. I would never make myself look ugly. I would never, do anything so violent. And they literally had a conversation where they talked about how they would kill themselves. And Jessica said, I would be beautiful. I would have myself all done up, and I would just overdose on pills. So a bit of a morbid conversation, but it's very interesting that this conversation was had, and Linda was there. Linda heard this conversation, and here very shortly after, Jessica is found having potentially done something that she had just said she would never do.
Right. Okay. It's an interesting data point for sure.
Very. Now, despite the bizarre nature of the death, officials quickly ruled it a suicide, with the cause of death being strangulation. Because of this ruling, only a partial autopsy was done, and then Jessica was cremated. At the time of her death, here's what you've been waiting for. Jessica did have some Xanax and some meth in her system, but it was not enough to overdose. So she did not overdose from the drugs.
Okay.
Now, unfortunately, the clothing that Jessica was wearing had been sent to the funeral home in a biohazard bag, and so it was destroyed, meaning none of it could be examined.
Oh, okay.
Jessica's purse and shoes, minus the shoelaces, were returned to Jessica's family. And to my knowledge, the police never did any testing whatsoever on any of those items. Jessica's family was able to view her body at the funeral home. And when they did, they saw some things that they found pretty disturbing. There is another photograph online, and it is of Jessica's left arm. And it shows exactly what I'm about to describe to you. Now, presumably, this photo was taken by someone in Jessica's family or friend group. In this photo, you see Jessica's left arm, and on the hand are several round red marks. To me, they kind of look like cigarette burns, or
Okay.
maybe chemical burns, and they're dotted all over her hand going up her arm. There was also bruising around her wrist, and then right above her wrist is a very weird indentation. To me, it looked like a bunch of squiggly lines, but many people believe it could have been a boot print. And when you say that to me, I think, oh, that maybe could have been like a boot print. And then all around her nails looks like blood and bruising.
Yikes.
Now, Linda said Jessica's arm did not look like this on Thursday.
So it wasn't something, I mean, I know specifically meth use can lead to pockmarked skin and things like that. So she just said it did not come from that.
It did not. And that is exactly one of my questions, saying, like, I know meth can change an appearance, and picking of the skin and things like that
Sure.
are one of the things that can happen. But that had not, at least as of Thursday, the last time Linda had seen Jessica, that had not happened. And it was not something Jessica had a history of doing.
Okay.
So whatever happened to her arm happened in just those couple days.
Okay.
Now, enough of Jessica's friends and family disagreed with the idea that Jessica had committed suicide that someone contacted forensic scientist Dr. Maurice Godwin and asked him to do his own investigation into Jessica's death. Dr. Godwin believes that Jessica's death should have been ruled undetermined, at the least conservative. Here's some of the reasons why. First of all, the shoestring that was around Jessica's neck would have been like where her Adam's apple would have been.
Okay.
And according to Dr. Godwin, there would not have been enough pressure in that position to cause someone to pass out, let alone die.
Oh, okay. That would be suspicious for sure.
Now, remember, she was also sitting to the side of the mailbox. And if you're looking at the mailbox, she's behind it with the left side of her body up against the post. This is a form of suicide. People have absolutely killed themselves from like these sitting positions.
It does seem strange to me. I have to say, when I first heard this case, I thought that was the prime reason to think it was a homicide versus a suicide, was just hanging yourself for a low, the mailbox. I mean,
Right.
it's low,
Like
right?
almost like in a sitting position.
Exactly. I mean, to me, that sounds unusual.
So I agreed with you. I was like, nobody does that. But actually, when I researched it, it is a common way of committing suicide. And I don't want to mention names, but there's even been some well-known celebrities who've actually used this as a form of suicide.
Really?
Like a sitting type position. And I
Okay.
think the reason why would be, when I kind of map it out in my head, if you wanted to hang yourself To try to fasten like a noose, like from a tree or from something up high, that would be difficult for me. One, I don't know how to tie a noose, and I wouldn't know how to get it up high enough. Like, I'm 5 feet tall, you know?
I clearly sit here in a very blessed position that I'm not familiar with
Right,
people committing suicide this way or
right,
deciding to take their life in that way. But the only knowledge I would really have of it is what's on the movies. And
right,
so, of course, those are the more dramatic,
right,
situations. So, I mean, I guess I see what you're saying,
right.
that it's certainly the less complicated
Less
way to do that. But
in some ways, because the other thing is, if you fall from a great height, gravity does the work,
okay,
right?
right.
In some ways, you, even if you changed your mind, you wouldn't be able to
Okay, sure.
help yourself.
Sure.
However, in a scenario like this, you have to force the
Be really
pressure,
committed to the process,
like,
yeah,
because
which is horrible.
it's not a gravity thing. You are literally strangling yourself, and there is a biological response to want to live,
Right.
even if you are suicidal, like, your body
Yes.
physically
Yes.
wants to fight, to live.
Yeah.
So, I'm with you. For me, part of what makes this part of what makes this feel like it absolutely could not be a suicide, because I do not believe that Jessica committed suicide in this way. And part of it is because of her manner of death.
Mhm.
I just don't think that
So, what you're
she did
saying is
this.
it's not as uncommon as you and I originally
It is
thought?
not. It is not, which is
Okay.
strange because it
Wow.
seems totally bizarre to
Okay.
me,
Well,
but
I
it is
have
not.
totally learned something new today.
Yeah. In addition to all of that, Dr. Godwin believes that in this position that she was found in, the entire time that she would have been strangling herself, which we know already would have been, painful and difficult and violent, she would have also had this intense pressure on her cheek from the mailbox post that she was up against.
Oh, okay.
And he said this would have been very painful. So it just didn't make a whole lot of sense to him that you would, again, commit suicide in this way, but cause more pain than necessary.
So, and it sounds like she could have even possibly repositioned herself around the mailbox to make it where it wasn't painful in this way. So he's saying, not saying she couldn't have committed suicide this way, attached to the mailbox. However, she would have done it at a different angle.
Right. Why wouldn't you
Okay.
choose to do it in a way less painful?
Okay. That's
Which,
fair.
absolutely, absolutely. I don't think just because someone is, you know, attempting to take their own life, it means they want to cause themselves pain.
While they're doing it. Yeah.
Right. Dr. Godwin also did not find the indent in Jessica's neck from the shoestring to be deep enough to have applied the force that would have been necessary to kill her. He thinks if she had actually hung herself, or if this shoelace, quite frankly, in any way had been the cause of her death, the indentation line from the strings should have been much deeper than it actually
And again,
was.
the strings were not positioned in the correct place, I guess, in order to have caused her death as well, because it was over that Adam's apple, right?
According to Dr. Godwin, yeah, he didn't think the positioning was
Okay, so the
right.
positioning and the force that he believes the shoestrings were placing on her neck were not enough to have caused death,
Correct, in his opinion.
in his opinion. Okay.
He also found the knot in the shoestrings to be tied in a way that did not make sense if Jessica did, in fact, do this herself. The shoestrings were tied together in a very teeny tiny, very neat knot at the very, very tip, like the very end of the shoestrings. And they had to be tied this way in order for the strings to have enough length to be able to reach the post and wrap around the post and still wrap around Jessica. There
Oh,
was not like
okay.
extra length.
Okay.
So if Jessica had done this to herself, it was believed it was probably done in the middle of the night. So it would have been potentially difficult to try to tie this so precisely in the dark. This was a really rural area. There was not a lot of artificial light. So to tie that knot in the dark, knowing exactly how much give or take it would have needed, seemed improbable.
Okay.
Now, at 3:29 a.m., Jessica's son received a text from Jessica's cell phone, and Dr. Godwin puts Jessica's time of death right at that time. So he believes that someone else either actually sent that text from Jessica's phone, or that it was sent from her while she was sitting at the mailbox, if that's where she was when she died, or the text had been sent right after she was killed. So the point of all that was this text went out right around when he believed she'd passed. And this text message told McLean that Jessica would be seeing him the next day. So it
Oh,
doesn't really line up. Like, if you are planning on ending your life, I don't know that I would send a text to my child saying, I'll see you tomorrow.
right,
I can see sending a text to my child, but I
right,
don't know that it would say, I see you tomorrow. It would probably say something a little more, I love you, or something
right,
to that
right. More
effect.
sentimental,
Right.
sure.
Ro Moreno is a former Memphis police officer, and he agrees that this was not the clear-cut suicide that local authorities claimed. He actually believed that this crime scene was really ill-preserved, and he went as far as to say that evidence was potentially destroyed. And in the crime scene photos, you can see police cars parked where Ro Moreno believes is way too close to Jessica's body.
Oh,
Now, additionally, Moreno doesn't believe the mailbox post itself would have held up under the pressure that would have been needed to strangle someone to death.
wow. That would be an important detail.
It would be, right? True Crime Daily went back to the scene with Ro Moreno, and together they gave the mailbox post just the slightest push, and it almost came out of the ground. However, I don't know how long after her death this was, so I don't think we can really use that as scientific evidence.
No, probably not.
Right. Now, remember when Jessica was found, her purse was found between her legs and her hand was resting on top of her purse. But Dr. Godwin also found this to be very unusual. It is his opinion that her hand would not have been in that position if she had strangled herself, because again, and I'm not trying to be insensitive, but strangulation, even when self-inflicted, is a violent death.
Yeah.
Again, a person's natural reaction is to fight,
To
to move
struggle against
around.
it, sure.
Absolutely. So the fact that her hands looked like they had been very calmly placed down on top of her purse.
Yet they were dirty and bloody, the fingernails, right?
I wouldn't say they were dirty. She was bruised.
Oh,
Around the nail beds were kind of bloody and like bruised looking around her nail beds.
okay.
And her arm was just kind of
Yeah.
bruised and had a
Okay.
weird imprint,
Okay.
but she wasn't like dirty.
But her hands were resting nicely on the bag.
Yes.
Okay.
It looked as if she just laid her hands on her bag.
Okay, interesting.
Now, here's something that gets me. Right here, if nothing else, I'm just like, nope, it wasn't suicide.
Okay.
This is how strongly I feel about this particular scenario.
Okay.
So Jessica had, longer hair.
Yeah.
Her hair was underneath the shoestrings.
Yeah, no.
No, right?
Yeah, no.
I don't know of anyone with long hair who would ever put anything over their neck. Your shirt, a necklace, a jacket. I mean, anytime anything goes over
It's
my
just
hair.
instinctual.
Instinctual. I mean, the idea literally like gives me chills to like I'm itchy just thinking about it. Yeah. In my notes, I say, we don't even think about it. It's what you do.
Yeah.
So first of all, there's that it would have been instinctual. But secondly, even if for whatever reason it didn't bother her to have her hair underneath the shoelaces, which is just, I can't even imagine. But let's just say, for the sake of open-mindedness, that didn't bother her. If you are actually trying to hang yourself or strangle yourself, wouldn't you want as little barrier between your body and the rope or string or whatever you were using as possible?
Yeah. I mean, to me, okay, this is how instinctual to me it'd be. Let's just say in some like insane universe, I was positioning someone. Literally, I would move her hair.
You know what?
I would move her hair.
Yes.
Like that's how like you just do that.
I wonder if a man would.
Probably not.
Right. Unless maybe he had long hair.
Yeah. Unless he would know.
Mm-hmm. Right. But I don't know that my husband would. I don't know
Like
that,
I would instinctually like I would move her hair.
right. I don't know that my husband, who's never had long hair in his life, I don't know if he were like dressing me, if I were incapacitated in some way, if he would pull my hair out.
No, and that's true. And even like my husband, I've had him help me like with like high necked shirts or even like a swimsuit or something where he has to tie it at the top and he like awkwardly moves my hair like out of the way and then I'm like, oh, let me get it. And then I'll just kind of move it to the side.
Right.
Because he wouldn't know how to do it. So anyway, I think I'm with you on that.
Yeah. For me, this was absolutely like there's no way. Now, for the sake again of being open-minded, She did have meth and Xanax in her system, so
Sure.
I don't know.
Does it
Right.
impair you from that? Maybe you don't experience the sensation the same, so maybe it doesn't feel as weird.
Right.
And we've already talked about this, and again, we're not trying to be insensitive about this, but in order to strangle yourself in this manner, you have to be truly committed to it. Wouldn't you want that rope as close to your neck as possible?
I would. To me, that's a given. That's a given.
Yeah.
On top of everything we just talked about, the fact that her hair was under the shoestrings would have again added to the pain because
Oh, okay.
her hair, Dr. Godwin believes her hair would have been kind of being pulled and like pulled out.
Oh.
And so
Oh.
again,
Yeah, I don't think
it
no.
just doesn't make sense.
No.
Now, we know statistically that when a woman commits suicide, she normally does it in a nonviolent way.
Yeah.
So generally women don't like to do things that, make them look ugly. Even
Right.
women who don't care about how they look, they
Right.
don't do things that make us look ugly. Women don't like to leave a mess behind.
Mhm.
We know this isn't always the case, of course, but statistically speaking, women are more likely to poison themselves or overdose,
We don't wanna
something
be
along those lines.
exposed. We don't wanna
Exactly. We
yes.
wouldn't be in the
Yes,
nude.
correct.
We think about these things.
Yes.
So speaking of not wanting to be exposed, again, the fact that she did this out in the open from a mailbox. Now, as I said earlier, this is a rural area and the property was, pretty surrounded by tall trees, but it just seems strange. She was right there on the side of the road. There was a lot of traffic going by. It just seems strange that, again, she would have left herself in this way, in this place, to be found the way she was.
Okay.
Now, remember, Jessica's shoes and purse were returned to her family. So Dr. Godwin was able to look over these items and he noticed a couple of interesting things. First, Jessica's purse had a metal clasp that connected the strap to the actual bag portion, and that clasp was broken, leaving him to wonder if maybe there had been some kind of intense force applied, causing this metal clasp to break. When looking at Jessica's shoes, he noticed a teeny tiny dark speck that he believes could have been blood splatter. But remember, instead of testing any of these items for evidence, the police gave them back to Jessica's family.
Right.
Dr. Godwin, as well as Jessica's family, really wanted the shoestrings to be tested. That would be important, right?
Absolutely,
Has
it would.
anybody else, touched these shoestrings? But unfortunately, the police lost those shoestrings.
Oh, for the love.
It's literally what they believe to be a suicide weapon, and you lose them?
Yeah.
It's Dr. Godwin's opinion that Jessica was involved in some type of struggle, but we may never know because, again, the police were so honed into the idea that this was a suicide, they didn't even bother to interview the neighbors to see if any of them saw or heard anything.
Wow.
So let's talk about this house where Jessica was found. As I mentioned earlier, it's not the kind of place you want to be. And I personally wonder if part of the reason why a more in-depth investigation was not done was because Jessica maybe got lumped in with this bad crowd she was hanging out with.
Sure.
Dr. Godwin even said that if this had been a housewife with no background of drug use, then there probably would have been a more thorough investigation. Now, get this, there were actually security cameras pointing in the direction of the mailbox. Jesse had security cameras at his house, which seems strange to me, but then
What?
maybe if you're like dealing drugs and stuff out of your house, you want to be able to see who's coming and going. But don't get too excited too quickly because every time Jesse was asked for that footage, he had a new excuse as to why it could not be provided. So True Crime Daily actually sent a reporter to his home to interview him, and he refused to speak to her on camera. But off camera, he gave her several excuses as to why there was no available footage from that night. His reasons ranged from he never looked for the video to he didn't know the passcode to log in to the video footage. Then he said the camera was off at the time of the incident. And then finally he said that the footage had been recorded over. So we don't know what, if any of those reasons
And again, the
are true.
police didn't ask for any of that?
Police believe this to be a suicide, and the
But
investigation,
they didn't even want to review it just to make sure.
well, again, reminds me of Phoebe Handsjuke. Just like,
Yeah.
once again, just it's right there, but we've
Yeah.
made our minds up, which
Yeah.
is just, I don't even know that incompetent is a strong enough word. If this is what you believe happened,
It's not going to take that many more man hours to just review the
right,
footage.
it actually will make your life easier
Because
because,
you want to keep answering these decades of questions.
right, absolutely. So, what really happened to Jessica? Now, strangely, even though it does cast suspicion on them, both Garland and Jesse have told media that they believe that the way Jessica was found was suspicious. According to Jesse, it looked like Jessica was placed there as opposed to having put herself there, but he does not believe his friend Garland had anything to do with it.
Yeah, of course not.
Now, in an interesting twist, a woman that Garland was dating right after Jessica, and quite frankly, I believe he was actually seeing them both at the same time. This woman came out and said that Garland was with her the night Jessica died. So there was no way he could have been involved in Jessica's death. But this is interesting because we know that Garland was with Jessica at Jesse's house that night. This is a fact. So it's really weird
I
that she
wonder,
made up this alibi.
was she one of the women that were at the house though?
Her story was they were not there.
Oh.
He was with her at her place.
Oh, at her place.
Right, which makes no sense
Well,
when
no, that
he's
doesn't make any
outright
sense.
said. If any, it casts more suspicion.
Yes.
As part of their investigation, True Crime Daily went to go interview this woman, and she told them that Garland wasn't home because he was at that very moment in court where he was facing domestic abuse charges against her.
Good grief.
Now, this is really tragic. Linda actually told me on the phone that this woman has since ended up dying from a drug overdose. So, again, it's just another tragedy. It
all
really is.
around, man.
So, I asked Linda what we could do here at the Dark Oak to help her in her quest to get answers. And at this point, that really is what she's hoping and praying for. She just would like some answers. She also wants the world to know that despite Jessica's problems, which she doesn't deny that Jessica had, and hey, we all have them, right?
Listen, not everyone is the ideal victim.
Right.
There isn't anyone on this planet that hasn't been that hasn't been touched by drug use or people that are struggling with substance addiction. It doesn't have to be our own struggle, but someone we know,
Right.
someone that we care about.
Right.
Everybody gets touched in different ways, and some people have a hard time pulling themselves out of it.
Right.
It doesn't mean that they don't deserve justice, and it doesn't mean that they were uncared for.
Right. Or that they weren't a good person,
Or that they weren't a
and
good
they
person.
didn't have value. Exactly.
Correct.
And, that's what Linda wants everyone to know. Jessica was a wonderful person. Jessica was a helper. Jessica was a good mom who loved her children. And Linda says, it's really important to her that little Eden not believe that her mother willingly left her.
Yeah.
Now, Linda is a Christian with a strong faith, and thankfully, in the years since her daughter's death, she has been able to get up every morning, some much harder than others, but she has been able to keep going, and she believes that God has really helped her through this. She said when Jessica died, her other daughter, Kayla, had just had twin babies,
Oh.
and Linda has been able to find such joy and healing in helping with those little babies.
Sure.
As I mentioned earlier, the area where the Johnson family lives has a really high rate of drug usage. But since losing Jessica, the rest of the extended family has really come together and taken a stance against addiction. And their family is in a beautiful place and able to wake up every morning free from those tethers. And though they miss her more than words can express every minute of every day, Linda told me that Jessica served a great purpose and her life had meaning. And even though she is no longer here the way they want her to be, she is helping those who love her every day.
That's really beautiful. And hopefully we can give some kind of comfort to Linda that her daughter's memory is not gone. She's still here. Her story is still out there. And hopefully somebody has some more answers. It's just a baffling case.
I would truly love for Linda to be able to get some answers because she knows that what she's been told didn't happen, but she doesn't know what actually did happen. And that's hard. That's hard.
It's so hard too that she still has to, share space with these people who possibly murdered her daughter, but at the very least, they didn't care
Right.
about her daughter, who clearly cared very much about them.
Right.
I feel like that would be very difficult too. Regardless of the circumstances, her life on this earth ended around people that didn't care for her the way that they should have.
People who didn't deserve her.
People that didn't deserve her.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think that's the most tragic part of the story for me.
I agree with you. As a mother, I've thought, that's sad that she was, trying to help these people who maybe couldn't be helped.
Yeah. And she was having trouble helping herself too.
Yeah. Well, on a happier note, maybe we should talk quickly about our Branch of Hope recipient for the month of May.
Yeah. Yeah, let's talk about our Branch of Hope Foundation report. We talked about it at the beginning of the episode. These are the details that I promised you. So our Branch of Hope is our way of giving back to the communities and the people that we speak about on our podcast. We in no way want this to be an exploitive podcast. We want this to be one of healing and community. And the way we've chosen to do that is by giving back, by giving a portion of our earnings from both our Patreon and sponsors to a nonprofit organization each month. And this month we are sponsoring the giftoflife27.org, and that was featured in the
Paulette Habara Fara.
There we go. So Cynthia's been working on her Spanish. But little Paulette's case, she was born premature. If you haven't listened to that case, please go and do so. But we've chosen the Gift of Life 27 because they help families that have been touched by premature birth, and they help little babies and little families in a way that we feel is significant and really touches all of us in that human way that we love. You can donate directly to the Gift of Life 27. Their information can be found on our website or our social media platforms. You can also join our Patreon, where a portion of your sponsorship will go directly to this organization. We are simply a podcast leading through words and actions. If you love this episode, love us, or love what we're doing at the Branch of Hope Foundation, please like and subscribe and tell someone. Forward this episode to someone who might like it.
Please send us an email at thedarkoakpodcast@gmail.com. We are open to your questions, comments, and anything else you want to share. And for other ways to connect, hop over to our website, thedarkoak.com.
And be sure to follow us to our next episode, where Cynthia covers the mysterious disappearance of Amy Bechtel. You don't want to miss that one, guys. Thanks for joining us, Shiver Seekers.
Bye.
Bye-bye. This episode of The Dark Oak was created, researched, written, recorded, hosted, edited, published, and marketed by Cynthia and Stephanie of Just Us Gals Productions, and made possible by you, our shiver-seeking listener. Special thanks goes to Justice Himes for our incredible artwork and Ryan Crete for our amazing music.